Hey now. Hey now. We should be live. Good evening, everyone. We should be live. I'm going to just be checking on that in a moment here. Okay, it looks like Twitch is good to go. Let's check YouTube. We'll do it over here, I guess. We are live and we are ready to... Tonight we're going to be reading The Return of the King. It says we're live. We'll do it over here, I guess. Okay, we don't need to have myself playing there. Okay, looking good. Oh, I'm not on the multi-stream. There we go. Hey, Daryl. Hey, Quake Ranger. How's it going, guys? How's it going, everybody? Welcome in to another stream today. We're going to be reading The Return of the King. So that's going to be exciting. I'm also going to be talking about some stuff that's going to be coming up. Also, I just realized just before I went live that the new video that should have been up last night for viewers who were members, like for example, Basic Quake Ranger is a member, for some reason was not available for members. I just fixed that. It should have been last night around, while it was pretty late, about 11:45 or so, it should have went live for members, but for some reason it was stuck in draft, and I noticed that. So I fixed that. That should be fixed now. Hey there, Mysterious. What is that? Oh, it's Mysteries. Mysteries Tumpy. Mysteries, how are you doing? How is everybody doing this evening? Oh, let me go ahead and get the word out that we're live. Let me do that. Let's post on social media and all that stuff. Hey, Yano. Hey, WT. How's it going? I need the YouTube URL. There it is. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about some stuff that has happened, some stuff that will be happening, just some exciting stuff before we start. That's going to be really cool. Mostly related to the play that we're going to be putting on. Because that is really, really on track. Oh, you're in Austria. That's cool. How is the weather over there in Austria? We're having unseasonably cold weather here in the United States, at least where I am in the U.S. Everything's freezing. I just came back from, you guys will like to hear this, I think, because it's interesting. I just came back from a little bit of a birthday celebration for my grandmother. She's 94 years old. 94 years old. So I just came back from that, jumped in the shower, and here we are, ready to read The Lord of the Rings with you guys. It's really cold there? Yeah. You're out in the forest. Just be careful you don't run into Morgoth out there, because... yeah. How's it going, kids? How's it going? So, all right. So, the newest video that is available for everybody to watch right now, I want to draw attention to this because I think it's a really important video. I think it's really good, and it was many, many months in the making. So if you haven't seen The Devilry of Isengard as Modern Generative AI, A Study and Cautionary Tale, which was put up, hey Dylan, which was put up just a few days ago. It had been available for members for a while. Highly recommend you watch that. I poured a lot into that video. And the new video for members that was supposed to go up Wednesday night, for some reason, was stuck in a draft state. I just fixed it. So it's now available for members and will be available for everybody else next Wednesday. Now, I have here, let's talk about, let's not hit the microphone. I have here, well, this is in the middle of it, but I have the play here of Beren and Luthien that Matt wrote. Of course, if you don't know Matt, you should, because he's one of my co-hosts over at the Council of Tolkien, and he wrote this play. This is hopefully not the first time you're hearing about it, Beren and Luthien. He wrote this last year, actually, and he got it out to us, and it is going to be performed live here on Twitch and YouTube by Matt and myself and Laurel Callahan for a special episode of the Council of Tolkien. Sid's not going to be there because he can't, and we needed a lady anyway. Hey, Ted. But Sid's going to be there. He's just not going to be performing. He's going to be in the audience, which, because he was like, I'm so sorry I can't, perform it. And I said to him, but what's really exciting is you get to be there in the audience and you get to watch it. And I saw just this, that typical Sid Kemp smile. But anyway, I wanted to give you guys like kind of the briefest of previews of what it's going to be like watching this live, because it's really cool. It's not just so I have a special Council of Tolkien screen right here, and as you can see, I have the play, sort of the curtain behind me, and Matt is going to be on my right for once. Usually he's on my left, but he's going to be on my right, unless we switch things around, but that's probably where he'll be. And Laurel will be over there. And what's really cool is that as we go through the different scenes, I will change the backdrop, like this. And we go to the Battle of Sudden Flame, and then we go to, the forest Menegroth, and and then we're in Thingol's what do you call it? Oh, that's not correct. I'm all over the place here. Thingol's throne room, and that's really exciting. So it's going to be a handful for me because I'll be acting in the play as well as changing the back splashes, but also. So here's the thing. So we did our first table read. You need your copy of The Return of the King. You got a few minutes. I'm not going to start right away. Go grab it if you want to follow along with me, because I'm going to be talking about the play for a little while longer. We did our first table read last month, and it was a lot of fun, and we worked through a few of the kinks and everything, but we couldn't figure out exactly what we were going to do in terms of the narration, because there's a lot of narration that sets up each scene and, sort of tells us where we're at and tells us what characters are present, and, so it's basically a narrative bit. And originally, Matt wanted to perform that, but I said, I don't think that's going to work. And we talked about it, Hey there, Deb. And a solution that we had that I came up with was, well, maybe Laurel should do the narration instead. Because she's only playing a few characters, because she's playing Melian and she's playing Luthien, and like one or two other characters. So she doesn't have as many roles. So we tried it that way. It was my grandmother's birthday today, actually. I just came back from the celebration. She's 94 years old today. She wanted a pistachio ice cream cake. But we tried it that way. And then Matt's concern was, even though Laurel is playing less roles, she has a lot of lines. And the middle part of the play is a lot of just Luthien. So it's a lot of just Laurel. So I said, okay, well, all right, you got a good point there, And so I said, well, what if we got Sid to pre-record the narration, and then I played it back, and that way he could be involved and not have to worry about doing it live and everything. And everybody thought that was, sort of a really great idea. And was really fond of that idea. But then I had a hard time getting a hold of Sid, because he's been so busy, and him and his wife are both very tied up with things. So I couldn't get a hold of him in time. So then I said, Matt, I know a guy who is a professional voice actor who would be willing to do it for us. So My friend Wayne did the narration for us, and I'm actually going to play you a little preview so you can hear the sort of narrative sound bits that you can expect to hear, because this is going to be really cool. I'm just going to give you the prologue. I'm going to play the prologue. This is professional voice acting in a real studio, and everything. So this is some effort went into this. But here, I'm going to play the prologue here for you.
The Battle of Sudden Flame. First Age 455 and the ongoing wars and ruin of Beleriand have been a scourge to the living and the land for previous decades. Now, 11 years later in 466, Beren escaped the war-ridden lands of his home to seek peace and shelter in Doriath, the ancient forest kingdom of Thingol and Melian. While traveling in stealth to avoid detection, he has heard the singing of Princess Luthien, and seeing her, has fallen in love with her, enchanted. They begin their romance in secret, and are finally discovered. Luthien has accepted Beren's proposed betrothal, but her father, King Thingol, has challenged Beren to perform a terrible and perilous task for the right to wed his daughter. However, unbeknownst to the king and queen, the Princess Luthien is determined to help Beren at all costs, so are many others, but for reasons both noble and nefarious, as you soon shall see.
So there's the intro narration, and there are many, many clips like that. Just wanted you guys to hear that. As a matter of there are 54 separate clips that will be played throughout that are going to give the narration. That way me and Matt and Laurel can actually just focus on just playing our roles, although I'll also be focused on the actual running of the stream as well, including changing the backdrop and playing those clips in the correct order and at the correct time. We are going to have a dress rehearsal that's going to happen this Saturday, so that's going to be really good. That was audiobook quality. Well, that's Wayne. Wayne, Ted, Insane Wayne on Twitch there. Yeah. Elu Thingol, not the goat for that. Elu Thingol, he was a good guy, but he did some things that he shouldn't have. There were some issues here and there. But doing the actual session with Wayne, it took us about 3 hours, not counting about a half hour of working through some technical kinks. So, but to be the guy, sort of like outside the booth and coaching him on pronunciations and going through it, it was an amazingly fun and enriching experience for both of us. And Wayne was really happy to be a part of this, and he's already been bragging to people that he knows in like the voice acting industry about being involved in a Tolkien production. So yeah, well, he has a heavy voice. And we actually did tweak it a little bit at the start. But that is actually exactly the way I wanted it to be, very sort of grave, and, and he started to get really into it. And I'll tell you a funny story was that originally he was going to go into the booth and do it all and just send it to me. And I said, I think I need to be there. I think we need to do this together because I need to coach you on pronunciation. And he's like, oh, you're right, So towards the end of the play... which word was it? Hold on, I'll tell you exactly what word it was. Because, he would try to say an Elvish word in a specific way. And I would say, no, that's not quite it. And I would say it, and then he would say it back, and I'd be like, yes, that's exactly right, So towards the end, let's see, it was pretty much the last page. So let's see. I think it was Menegroth. No, it wouldn't have been Menegroth, because that's said near the beginning of the play. Let's see. I have it here. I'm looking at the last page, but I can't quite... this is the part with Mondos. Doriath. Oh, here it is. Doriath and the Isle of Tolgalen. where Beren and Luthien have been placed. Neldor. Well, the most people would say Neldoreth, but he said Neldoreth and then very quickly corrected him and said, "It's Neldoreth, isn't it?" And I said, "Oh, you're understanding how the language works now, aren't you?" He says, "Yes, I'm kind of getting it." So he was amazingly professional, really fun to work with. It was just very good. Because I don't know, like I said, we tried it with Matt doing the narration. We tried it with Laurel doing the narration. I didn't want to do it because I already talk enough on these things, So I was like it's got to either be Sid or a professional. And when I finally got a hold of Sid, and he was like, kind of sorry that he missed out on the opportunity to do that, but admitted that he probably wouldn't have been able to make the time to do that. So it was really cool to work with Wayne and to have somebody coming in sort of from the outside there, Imagine getting Matt Berry to do the voice acting. I mean, there are, I tell you, there's a lot of people that I would love to get involved with things, but I don't exactly have their numbers. Hey there, Alice, how's it going? But yeah, like I said, we're doing the whole voice, the voice recording was great. And then he had to edit everything, and there will be outtakes, by the way, that I'll probably put in a separate video. Fun little outtakes where, either he laughed or I laughed, or, we were having a lot of fun by the end of it. So there were plenty of outtakes. So I would like to probably do a separate video. Now, if you don't see this live, of course, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube afterwards, but there is going to be a second version of it that's going to have even more production, where I'm going to insert music and a few more graphics and everything to really, really make it cool. And that is probably going to be a members-only video, whereas the version that was just presented as it was live will be available to everybody. That's the way that I plan on doing it. But anyway, let's come on over to here. And here we are with the Return of the King. My copy doesn't quite look like that, does it? We have a little bit of a difference here. And of course, parts of the cover are green, so you can kind of see the Rivendell backdrop there, which I think that looks really cool. It's the part where it says the Lord of the Rings, and then the green ring around there is actually keyed out, so to speak. But yeah, we're going to start with Chapter 3 of Book 5. Now, so we did the first chapter, which was Minas Tirith. We did the second chapter, The Passing of the Grey Company. So basically, we followed Pippin as he and Gandalf arrived in Minas Tirith, and then Pippin sort of got to look around the city, and he pledged himself to Denethor and became, sort of one of the tower guards, and he met Beregond and his son Burgle, and we got the introduction to Prince Imrahil, who is a pretty important character for the Return of the King. And then we jumped over to follow Aragorn as he took the paths of the dead. A very fun chapter, very intense chapter. For this one, the Muster of Rohan, we're actually going to go over to Mary's perspective now. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Yes, my grandmother does have good taste in cake, actually. I tell you, I actually think she has good taste in most things. I'll tell you a funny story. So my sister was swearing by these frozen pizzas that she bought. And I was like, frozen pizza? What? We grew up in New York City. We don't really eat frozen pizza. But she was saying that they were good, right? And I didn't necessarily believe her. But then when my grandmother said that she liked the frozen pizzas, I was like, okay, they're probably good then. They're probably good. But yeah, she wanted a pistachio ice cream cake. So that's what was created, and it was good, I gotta tell you. Pistachio is also one of my very favorite flavors. I think somebody else had said that as well. Kits, you said that, and yeah, Deb also said love pistachio ice cream. I think people of a certain generation love pistachio ice cream. I think if you're millennial or older, you like it, and then younger than that, maybe, I don't know, but my nephews like it, so who knows, right? But I certainly have always liked pistachio. As a matter of fact, when I was growing up, yeah, when I was in elementary school, like first through fifth grade, I was in the school in Brooklyn, New York, and they had ice cream for sale in the cafeteria. These ice cream sandwiches, and they came in 4 flavors. And to me, this was like the main default 4 flavors of ice cream. It was chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, pistachio. So, then growing up, like, starting in like the 2000s, it seemed like pistachio just kind of vanished as an option. Like, it just wasn't around. And, I was just like, well, wait, why? Like, why can't I get pistachio ice cream? I guess it just kind of went out of fashion for a little while. But recently, it's come back into fashion, I feel. But yeah, if you've never even been exposed, have you ever had pistachios at all? Like the actual nuts? And by the way, William Stone, Content Zone in the chat there. That is my moderator, Alice, good friend of mine, who has a GoFundMe going for replacing some belongings, a lot of belongings actually, from a terrible, terrible apartment fire. Completely lost their home for a while there and had to move. And so that is channel approved. That link is safe and allowed to be there. And if you can't chip in for that, it's completely understandable. But I would ask you to take a look at it and maybe share it around to anybody that you think might be interested to help out there. But anyway, so we're going to go to Chapter 3, Book 5, Chapter 3, The Muster of Rohan, where we're jumping over to Mary's perspective. Well, it's actually, what's interesting, and not a lot of people know this, is that the actual flavoring in pistachio ice cream is not actually pistachio, it's actually almond. So you're actually eating almond ice cream with bits of pistachios in it. So maybe that might make it a little better for you, but yeah. Yeah, see? And then Alice just saying the same exact thing. You can get pistachio extract to make like real pistachio ice cream without the almond extract, but it's so expensive. It's so expensive. The almond extract is just as good and is not nearly the price. So here we go. Chapter 3, The Muster of Rohan. Now all roads were running together to the east, to meet the coming of war and the onset of the shadow. And even as Pippin stood at the great gate of the city and saw the Prince of Dol Amroth ride in with his banners, the King of Rohan came down out of the hills. Day was waning. In the last rays of the sun, the riders cast a long pointed shadows that went on before them. Darkness had already crept beneath the murmuring firwoods that clothed the steep mountainsides. The king rode now slowly at the end of the day. Presently the path turned round a huge bare shoulder of rock and plunged into a gloom of soft, sighing trees. Down they went in a long, winding file. When at last they came to the bottom of the gorge, they found that evening had fallen in the deep places. The sun was gone. Twilight lay upon the waterfalls. All day, far below them, a leaping stream had run down from the high pass behind, cleaving its narrow way between pine-clad walls, and now, through a stony gate, it flowed out and passed into a wider vale. The riders followed it, and suddenly Harrowdale lay before them, loud with the noise of waters in the evening. There the white Snowborn, joined by the lesser stream, went rushing, fuming on the stones down to Edoras and the green hills and the plains. Away to the right, at the head of the great dale, the mighty Starkhorn loomed up above its vast buttresses swathed in cloud, but its jagged peak, clothed in an everlasting snow, gleamed far above the world, blue-shadowed upon the east, red-stained by the sunset of the west. Merry looked out in wonder upon this strange country, of which he had heard many tales upon their long road. It was a skyless world, in which his eye, through dim gulfs of shadowy air, saw only ever-mounting slopes, great walls of stone behind great walls, and frowning precipices wreathed with mist. He sat for a moment half-dreaming, listening to the noise of water, the whisper of dark trees, the crack of stone, and the vast, waiting silence that brooded behind all sound. He loved mountains, or he had loved the thought of them, marching on the edge of stories brought from far away. But now he was borne down by the insupportable weight of Middle-earth. He longed to shut out the immensity in a quiet room by a fire. So I want to just comment, almonds all the way down, yes. Well, let's see, who gets that reference? I get the reference, but let's see if anybody knows what William Stone Contenzone is referencing when they say almonds all the way down. Sometimes I make references, and I really love it when people get the references. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that Merry is having a bit of a Bilbo moment here, right? Like, Bilbo always loved the idea of adventure and of seeing lands far away and going and seeing things that he wouldn't see in the Shire, like mountains and much larger rivers than what he was used to, and crazy valleys and elves and all this stuff. And then when he goes out, it's like, oh wow, it's rewarding and everything, but it's dangerous and it's scary, and sometimes you just want to be home. Maybe thinking about mountains is better than actually going and seeing them, if that means that you might die in battle or something. Of course, now Merry is like Bilbo in other ways, that he's one of the bravest characters, but he's borne down by the insupportable weight of Middle-earth. This is the sort of metaphor you don't really see Tolkien use all that often, where he's basically saying he has the weight of the world on his shoulders. So Merry is just sort of having this moment of, he's been through so much, he's seen things that he never would have seen living in the Shire, or in Buckland as he did, and he is really just finally taking in the enormity of it. And no, that's not the reference. Although the movie title that you're thinking is spelled slightly differently. No, it's a reference to, I don't know if this is real or if this was apocryphal, but there was a scientist that was speaking of cosmology in a chat format, and there was a woman in the audience who said, all of this is ridiculous. Everybody knows that the world rests on a turtle's back. And he said, well, what does the turtle stand on? And she got very sort of angry and confused, and just blurted out, it's turtles all the way down. Of course, then the follow-up question be all the way down to that, but the reaction is to just laugh uproariously anyway, because that's very funny. It hasn't happened yet. We've read 4 paragraphs, and it was all descriptions of scenery. It hasn't happened yet, but I want you guys, I'm going to put this out there now. Be on the lookout, because Tolkien lapses into this, especially when he's describing scenery. He hasn't done it here, but be on the lookout for alliteration, and that sort of Old English and Middle English poetic alliteration, double and triple alliteration that you might see in places like, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight or Beowulf. And Tolkien runs into it. He did it a lot in The Two Towers, and we were pointing that out a lot. I'm not going to point out every time it happens, but I want you guys to be on the lookout for it. Look for double or triple alliteration. And what I mean by that, because alliteration could be 2 words or 3 words or whatever in the same sentence that have the same starting sound, like I just did, same starting sound. That's triple alliteration. However, double or triple alliteration is when they're all together, like in a row, not spaced out with other words between them. So keep an eye out for that, although sometimes you'll see it with words where it's spaced out because he's doing poetry. In a sense, he's doing prose poetry. Let's continue. He was very tired, for though they had ridden slowly, they had ridden with very little rest. Hour after hour, for nearly 3 weary days, he had jogged up and down, over passes and through long dales, and across many streams. Sometimes, where the way was broader, he had ridden at the king's side, not noticing that many of the riders smiled to see the two together, the hobbit on his little shaggy grey pony, and the Lord of Rohan on his great white horse. Then he had talked to Theoden, telling him about his home and the doings of the Shire folk, or listening in turn to tales of the Mark and its mighty men of old. See right there, mighty men. But most of the time, especially on this last day, Merry had ridden by himself just behind the king, saying nothing, and trying to understand the slow, sonorous speech of Rohan that he had heard the men behind him using. It was a language in which there seemed to be many words that he knew, though spoken more richly and strongly than in the Shire. Yet he could not piece the words together. At times some rider would lift up his clear voice in stirring song, and Merry felt his heart leap, though he did not know what it meant. Let's talk about that, actually. Let's talk about that. So, Merry is talking about the language of Rohan and how he's trying to listen to it as much as he can so that he can learn it. And he's noticing that there are familiar words in there. Hi, Spielkopf, how's it doing? And this is because the language that he is most familiar with is a Hobbitish dialect of a language that in Middle-earth is called the Common Speech, or is sometimes referred to as Westron. And the reason that it's called Westron, referring to the West, is because it is derived from the language of Numenor, which was called Adonaic. So, Adonaic is sort of an older form of Westron, and then even older than that is the language that Rohan speaks. Because the language actually started when the fathers of men came out of the east, because we know that they came out of the very far east, even further to the east than where the elves first awoken. And Morgoth went out there and he incultivated everybody. He got men, mortals under his control, and there were many dark days. But then some of the men broke away from Morgoth's sphere of control, and they traveled into the west, and they met two peoples as they went further into the west. The first was the dwarves. They met the earliest dwarves, and the dwarves actually started teaching them a bit of their own language, which is Kuzdul. And then they met the elves. And, for example, Finrod was one of the first elves that made contact with men. And, but they didn't just meet elves like Finrod. They met a lot of the Avari. And they learned a sort of primitive Quendian elvish language and sort of mixed it with the dwarvish language and created the first Mannish dialect. And then this eventually became something that was very specific to a certain region of Middle-earth, which we call Wilderland, or also Rovanian. And that a lot of these, not the lower men, like the men that live in like Mirkwood and such, and the men that live in Dale, and the men that live in places like Esgaroth, but I'm talking about what they call them the middlemen. They're not quite the Dunedain, but they're of a higher stock and nobility than the typical men that lived in places like I mentioned, or in places like Breeland and Eriador. They were called the middlemen, or the Northmen sometimes. Or Northmen were a specific type of middlemen, is what I should say. And then they became allies with the men of the south in places like Gondor, and that's how Rohan was founded. And we're going to talk about that a lot when we read Unfinished Tales, because there is a whole story in Unfinished Tales that is about the founding of Rohan, but specifically about the language, but basically the language of Rohan, which, by the way, is not called Rohirric, despite what you hear people on like Tumblr or Quora or Facebook or wherever say. They call it Rohirric. Rohirric sounds nice, but that's not what Tolkien called it. Tolkien called it Rohanese, or simply the speech of Rohan. So the way that it's represented in the actual book, and keep in mind that Tolkien is working off of the conceit that this was all written by people like Frodo and such, and that he's translating it from that Westron speech. So that Westron, that common speech, is represented in the book as modern English, whereas Rohanese, which is a much older dialect, is actually represented in the book as Old English. Now, if you've ever heard Old English, you're going to have that same reaction that Merry just had. where you're gonna sort of like, it's like I know some of these words, but I don't really understand it. It's familiar and yet unfamiliar. And it is interesting that you point that out, yes, that the dwarves shared their language with very, very, very few people. They're very secretive about it. There's specific things that they never share with anybody, such as their real names and everything. Okay, yeah, no, sure, you can do that. You can do that. I'll as a matter of fact, I think I can just scroll up and pin that. Give me 1 second here. There you go. You don't have to do it again. I just pinned it. So, anyway, so basically, when you do eventually hear snatches, and I will talk about each of these little snatches as they come up of the Rohan words, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how Tolkien actually either uses Old English to represent the way that people in Rohan speak, or he reconstructs Old English words. And I'll give you guys one example now, is that in there is a conversation that takes place between Theoden and Merry, in which he refers to Merry and his people as halflings. And Merry says, well, we actually don't like that word. We prefer to call ourselves hobbits. And Theoden, being a very smart guy and a bit of a scholar and a linguist of his own, he immediately understands the word hobbit. He understands what it means and the etymology. It all comes to him at once because he knows languages. But when he refers to Merry later as a hobbit, he doesn't say hobbit, he says holbitla. So, which a lot of people have said, well, that's Old English, and it means hole dweller. And what gets repeated by people often, somewhat erroneously, is that Tolkien took this Old English word holbitla and then derived hobbit from it. And hobbit means hole dweller because it's derived from holbitla. However, there is no actual Old English word holbitla. Tolkien created that. So what Tolkien did was he said, well, here's the word for burrow and here's the word for dwelling. I'm going to mash them together and make it work, because Tolkien was a scholar of language. He was a scholar of many languages, and Old English was one of them. And we're going to see a few words like that they are basically constructed Old English. Now let's see. You have a question here. If hobbits were quite shy and spoke their own language, how come they are fluent in the common tongue? Well, they don't speak a whole language of their own. They speak a dialect. They speak the Hobbitish dialect of the common tongue, which is Westron. So essentially, what that means is it's sort of like a regional accent. They have their own slang. They have their own manner of speech. So it's sort of like if you go from Scotland to London, and you're used to the very Scottish way of speaking, and then somebody starts speaking to you in Cockney rhyming slang. That's sort of like the difference there. You know what I mean? So think of all the different forms of English, because the Westron language, the common speech, is represented as English in the text. Think of all the different forms of English there are and all the different dialects. And even though people in different parts of the UK or people in Australia or people in the United States or Canada and many other parts of the world speak English differently, but we still basically understand each other. So, and the reason it's called the common speech is because everybody in Middle-earth speaks it. There isn't anybody that doesn't speak common speech, it seems. Even the orcs use common speech at times when they want their enemies to understand them, at least. So so there you have it. So when you hear Hobbitish, it's not a language, it is just a dialect. But here we go. Let's continue on. Language is my favorite aspect of Tolkien study, so when it comes up where, oh, here, Mary's interested in the language, let me talk a whole bunch about that, I get excited. All the same, he had been lonely, and never more so now than at the day's end. He wondered where in all this strange world Pippin had gone to, and what would become of Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli. Then suddenly, like a cold touch on his heart, he thought of Frodo and Sam. I am forgetting them, he said to himself reproachfully. And yet they are more important than all the rest of us. And I came to help them, but now they must be hundreds of miles away, if they are still alive. He shivered. Harrowdale at last, said Éomer. Our journey is almost at an end. They halted. The paths out of the narrow gorge fell steeply. Only a glimpse, as through a tall window, could be seen of the great valley and the gloaming below. A single small light could be seen twinkling by the river. This journey is over, maybe, said Theoden, but I have far yet to go. Last night the moon was full, and in the morning I shall ride to Edoras, to the gathering of the Mark. But if you would take my counsel, said Éomer in a low voice, you would then return hither, until the war is over, lost or won. Theoden smiled. Nay, my son, for so I will call you. Speak not the soft words of Wormtongue in my old ears. He drew up himself, and looked back at the long line of his men fading into the dusk behind. Long years in the space of days, it seems, since I rode west. But never will I lean on this staff again. If the war is lost, and what good will be my hiding in the halls? And if it is won, what grief will it be, even if I fall, spending the last of my strength? But we will leave now. Tonight I will lie in the hold of Dunharrow. One evening of peace at least is left for us. Let us ride on. Hey, Maddie. Let me talk about that very briefly. So, Éomer is getting sort of like gently chided here, but he's also elevated by Theoden in a way that he hasn't been previously. The way that he's being gently chided, he's like, hey, don't talk to me the way that Grima talked to me. And it's not like Éomer said anything wrong here, because Éomer is only saying, maybe you should stay home. You're super old. You've already fought in a battle. You've proven everything there is to prove. Let me take care of things. But that's actually the way that Grima got in his head, is by telling him, you're old, you're over the hill, you really can't be trusted to do anything. Let me take care of everything for you. Now, the difference is that Grima was attempting to manipulate him, whereas Éomer is coming at it from a genuine concern for this old man. And that's why he's being only chided gently. And Theoden's saying, look, I could stay home where it's safe, but if the battle is lost, I'm not going to be safe for very long. And what he says but doesn't say, and you're going to hear these words in a different form from Merry in not too long. Hey, Moogle. What goes unsaid here is that if he stays home, but the battle is won, then he will have been diminished in his own mind. He's going to be left out of the great tales of the great victory over Sauron, and he's going to be ashamed of himself for not joining the battle. So, and that's another way, and I'm going to point this out when Merry speaks on this matter, of how similar Theoden and Merry are as characters. Now, the way that Éomer is elevated in this scene is Theoden refers to Éomer as his son. Now, he's not his actual son, but this is the first time that we see this, and he says, basically, I'm calling you son now. I think that Theoden is at his life's end. Well, we know he's at his life's end. He knows he's at his life's end, and he's going to make it one heck of an end. He really is. And one thing that he's going to do, and you're going to see it with Éomer, and you're going to see it with Éowyn, is these two orphans that he took in that are actually his nephew and his niece. He's going to start referring to Éomer as son. He's going to start referring to Éowyn as his daughter. Now, he had a son, Theodred. Theodred died. And so he's like, I have nobody but these two. I might as well refer to them as son and daughter. So, that even though... So, Éomer, he's got to be feeling pretty good about himself because, he sort of said, don't talk any of that Grima nonsense to me. Yes, he did say that to him, and it's sort of a gentle sort of reprimand, but at the same time, he's calling him son. Because here's the thing. With Theodred dead, Éomer is the heir to the throne. So, there you go, right? That's really important. Now, okay. All right, that's working. Okay. The pin is strange because it goes on the bottom of the YouTube chat instead of the top. So, the way that pins work is different. Let's continue on. In the deepening dusk, there it is. There's alliteration. In the deepening dusk, they came down into the valley. Here the Snowborn flowed near to the western halls of the dale, and soon the path led them to a ford where the shallow waters murmured loudly on the stones. The ford was guarded. As the king approached, many men sprang up out of the shadow on the rocks, and when they saw the king, they cried with glad voices, "Theoden King! Theoden King! The king of the mark returns!" Then one blew a long call on a horn. It echoed in the valley. Other horns answered it, and light shone out across the river. And suddenly there rose a great chorus of trumpets from high above, sounding from some hollow place, as it seemed, that gathered their notes into one voice, and sent it rolling and beating on the walls of stone. So the king of the Mark came back victorious out of the west to Dunharrow, beneath the feet of the White Mountains. There he found the remaining strength of his people already assembled, for as soon as his coming was known, captains rode to meet him in the ford, bearing messages from Gandalf. Dunhir, chieftain of the folk of Harrowdale, was at their head. "At dawn 3 days ago, Lord," he said, "Shadowfax came like a wind out of the west to Edoras, and Gandalf brought tidings to your victory to gladden our hearts. But he brought also word from you to hasten the gathering of the riders." And then came the winged shadow. "The winged shadow," said Theoden. "We saw it also, but that was in the dead of night before Gandalf left us." "Maybe, Lord," said Dunhir. "Yet the same or another like it. A flying darkness in the shape of a monstrous bird passed over Edoras that morning, and all men were shaken with fear, for it stooped upon Meduseld, and as it came low almost to the gable, there came a cry that stopped our hearts. Then it was that Gandalf counselled us not to assemble in the fields, but to meet you here in the valley under the mountains. And he bade us to kindle no more lights or fires than barest need asked. So it has been done. Gandalf spoke with great authority. We trust that it is as you would wish. Naught has been seen in Harrowdale of these evil things." "It is well," said Theoden. "I will ride now to the hold. And there, before I go to rest, I will meet the marshals and captains. Let them come to me as soon as may be." The road now led eastward, straight across the valley, which was at that point little more than 1/2 mile in width. Flats and meads of rough grass, grey now in the falling light, lay all about, but in front of the far side of the dale Merry saw a frowning wall, a last outlier of the great roots of the Starkhorn, cloven by the river in ages past. On all the level spaces there was a great concourse of men. Some thronged in the roadside, hailing the king and the riders from the west with glad cries, but stretching away into the distance behind there were ordered rows of tents and booths, and lines of picketed horses, and great store of arms, and piled spears bristling like thickets of new planted trees. Now all the great assembly was falling into shadow, and yet, though the night chill blew cold from the heights, no lanterns glowed, no fires were lit. Watchmen heavily cloaked paced to and fro. Merry wondered how many riders there were. He could not guess their number in the gathering gloom, but it looked to him like a great army, many thousand strong. While he was peering from side to side, the king's party came up under the looming cliff on the eastern side of the valley, and there suddenly the path began to climb, and Merry looked up in amazement. He was on a road, the like of which he had never seen before, a great work of men's hands and years beyond the reach of song. Upwards it wound, coiling like a snake, boring its way across the sheer slope of rock. Steep as a stair, it looped backwards and forwards as it climbed. Up it horses could walk, and wains could be slowly hauled, but no enemy could come that way except out of the air, as if it was defended from above. At each turn of the road there were great standing stones that had been carved in the likenesses of men, huge and clumsy-limbed, squatting cross-legged, with their stumpy arms folded on fat bellies. Some in the wearing of years have lost all features save the dark holes of their eyes that still stared sadly at the passers-by. The riders hardly glanced at them. The Pukelmen they called them, and heeded them little. No power or terror was left in them, but Merry gazed at them with wonder and a feeling almost of pity, as they loomed up mournfully in the dusk. Oh, hey, Tommy, how's it going? So, I don't want to talk about a lot about the Pukelmen because there's not a lot to talk about, but I will say that Tolkien did tell a story about what the Pukelmen were and how they related to sort of the indigenous men of this region before Numenor came. And there is a story yeah, we're going to get to eventually about the Pukelman. So you will learn more about it, just not today, not in the Return of the King. And the reason that Rohan, they say they don't really pay attention to them because these things are older than Rohan. They didn't put those statues there. They're older than Rohan. They're older than Gondor. And like I said, it's very indigenous of the Southlands, and the people that are from Middle-earth are not from Numenor. Of course, the people who were from Numenor were originally from Middle-earth, but, there's thousands of years of difference in living close to the Undying Lands and everything. But I did want to comment that there is a story. It's not even in Unfinished Tales. I forget what book it's actually published in. I want to say it was in The Peoples of Middle-earth, but I'm unsure. And because I'm unsure, I'm going to find out. So let's grab this one here, because this has The Peoples of Middle-earth in it. Now it's not an Unfinished Tales, and let's see. I'm pretty sure I want to say it was in. Oh, it's Morgoth's Ring. I want to say that it was in. Let's see, not in the War of the Jewels. I don't think. I think it was in the Peoples of Middle-earth. Here we go. Let me see the. Table of contents here. Here it is. Okay, so there is a section. Okay, so you're somewhat right, because there is a section of the book, The Peoples of Middle-earth, that is actually called Unfinished Tales. It's not related to the book that's called Unfinished Tales. But if you have The Peoples of Middle-earth, Unfinished Tales there, which is part 4 of The Peoples of Middle-earth, it starts in page 409. And there's 2 stories. There's The New Shadow, which is the abandoned sequel to The Lord of the Rings. And then there is a story called Tal Elmar, and that's the story that I was thinking of. At least I'm pretty sure Tal Elmar is the story I'm thinking of. Which, yeah, that's the one that I was thinking of. Now, you're talking about the Standing Stone. I don't remember a story called The Standing Stone in Unfinished Tales. There is a whole section about the Palantiri, which are stones. But you hear about standing stones a lot. Many, many cultures use standing stones. And usually they are older than whatever region they're in. Yeah. I knew it was in that book just because I'm thinking process of elimination. You know what I mean? Like, I knew it wasn't in the Nature of Middle-earth because it was a story. And I'm like, okay, like the only book that makes sense is The Peoples of Middle-earth. Because that was the very last of the history of Middle-earth, and it's at the very end of it. So it's basically like, okay, in the history of Middle-earth, we went through all of the Silmarillion, we went through the Lord of the Rings, and now here's sort of like the leftovers, and Tal Elmar is the very last thing there. It's a leftover. But thank you, Tommy. Like I said, when you study it over and over again, you do kind of remember things here and there, and sometimes you remember things wrong, which you have to be careful. That's why I actually grabbed the book to check. I didn't want to say that it was in that book and then, be wrong about it. Let me take a water break here before we continue. But I believe it was Tal Elmar was the story. I could be wrong, because there's 2 stories. There's one that is almost a take on like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, except it's like The Boy Who Cried Numenor. And then there's the one with the little statue, He uses the word, yeah. But there is a section in Lost Tales, yeah, that refers to standing stones, but that's not the same standing stones here. It is better, and it's really great that I finally figured out the configuration where I can have half of the books right here and the other half right down here. I really wanted to. I got these little shelves, and I wanted to put them all on the desk, but with 2 monitors, the computer, and all these different hard drives that I have laying around, and then I have a place for my phone, and I have a place for some different props for streaming and stuff, and many cords and wires and stuff and controllers, and there isn't room for a second shelf. So I tried to make it work, and eventually I was like, what if I just put it on the floor next to my chair? The books are not actually resting on the floor, thankfully. But there you have it. Let's continue on. Okay. Let's see. So we just went through the whole Pukelman thing. After a while, he looked back and found that he had already climbed some hundreds of feet above the valley, but still far below he could dimly see a winding line of riders crossing the ford and filing along the road towards the camp prepared for them. Only the king and his guard were going up into the hold. At last the king's company came to a sharp brink, and the climbing road passed into a cutting between walls of rock, and so went up a short slope and out on to a wide upland. The Fyrienfeld, men called it, a green mountain field of grass and heath, high above the deep-delved courses of the Snowbourne, laid upon the lap of the great mountains behind, the Starkhorn southwards, and northwards the saw-toothed mass of ice of Ironsaga, between which there faced the riders, the grim black wall of the Dwimmerberg, the haunted mountain, rising out of steep slopes of somber pines. There's a triple alliteration right there: steep, slopes, and somber. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I absolutely could fill up the whole, but like I said, there's no room. There's so many things here, because even I couldn't even put them behind the monitors because that's where like the router is and the modem and so there's just no room. And this is a big desk. By the way, Dwimmerberg is they call it Haunted Mountain. That is literally what it means. Berg with B-E-R-G is mountain. If it was U-R-G, Berg means castle. But Dwimmer, and we're going to talk a lot about the word Dwimmer when we go to the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. But Dwimmer is an old English term derived from the Anglo-Saxon, and it basically means sorcery. But yeah. It actually it means sorcery, but it also means ghosts. It refers to specters. So you could use it to refer to magic, or you could use it to refer to dead people. In this case, it's referred to ghosts because he's translating Dwimmerberg as Haunted Mountain. But let's continue here. Dividing the upland into two, there marched a double line of unshaped standing stones that dwindled into the dusk and vanished into the trees. Those who dared follow that road came soon to the black Dimmelt under Dwimmerberg, and the menace of the pillar of stone and the yawning shadow of the forbidden door. Yes, begone foul Dwimmerlake. I did a very... Joe, did you happen to see or perhaps read the linguistic deep dive I did into the word Dwimmerlake? I think you'd find it interesting. I did a very, very thorough study of the word Dwimmerlake, mostly related to the lake part, because what does that mean, and a lot of people have interpreted it differently, but I personally think that it referred to a mantle, which makes sense. If she's calling the Witch King a Dwimmerlake, she's calling it a cloaked specter. No? Okay. Well, I'll find it for you, and I'll put the link in there. Let's see. Let me go ahead and Tommy, are you a bit of a historian? A history buff? I'm gonna grab the link for you guys. I did a linguistic deep dive on Dwimmerlake. And this is where because I've referenced this a few times, where I had this fellow from South Africa become extremely argumentative with me because he was insisting that Dwimmerlake was not Old English, that it was in fact Afrikaans. And I said, well, it's similar because Afrikaans is derived from Dutch, and Dutch is derived from Old English. So there you have it. Hey, Narva, how's it going? Let me grab that Dwimmerlake. Oh, I spelled it wrong. That's not going to work. Oh, it came up anyway. All right, I'm going to put the link here in the chat. I'll do it on both Twitch and YouTube. There it is on YouTube. There it is on Twitch. So that is, like I said, that was quite I don't know what episode it was in. It was on in term of... in terms of the answers questions show here on YouTube, but I was able to. It's easier to find things on Quora, and yes, Alice is also a history buff. I think I just kind of attract people who have these sort of interests. I think of history or literature, all sort of interesting things like that. But I'm very proud of that specific article. So I figured, since we were going to talk about Dwemer and how it could mean a few different things, but mostly related to either the dead or to magic or sorcery, which, by the way, original sort of definition of sorcery is communing with the dead, so that's why there's that similarity there. And of course, but the most interesting thing is Lake. I believe that when he came up with the word Dwemer Lake, because it is a constructed Old English word, it's not a real word that existed in those times. It's something Tolkien came up with, that he was referring to a mantle, and I have good evidence to back that up there in the article there. But let's continue here. Once I find where I left off. Here we are. Such was the dark Dunharrow, the work of long forgotten men. Their name was lost long. Let's try that again. Their name was lost, and no song or legend remembered it. For what purpose they had made this place, as a town, or a secret temple, or a tomb of kings, none in Rohan could say. Here they laboured in the dark years, before ever a ship came from the west to the western shores, or Gondor of the Dunedain was built. And now they had vanished, and only the old Puckle men were left, still sitting at the turnings of the road. Mary stared at the lines of marching stones. They were worn and black. Some were leaning, some were fallen, some cracked or broken. They looked like rows of old and hungry teeth. He wondered what they could be, and he hoped that the king was not going to follow them into the darkness beyond. Then he saw that there were clusters of tents and booths on either side of the stony way, but these were not set near the trees, and seemed rather huddled away from them towards the brink of the cliff. The greater number were on the right, where the Firion feld was wider, and on the left there was a smaller camp, in the midst of which stood a tall pavilion. From this side a rider now came out to meet them, and they turned from the road. As they drew near, Mary saw that the rider was a woman with long braided hair gleaming in the twilight, yet she wore a helm and was clad to the waist like a warrior and girded with a sword. "Hail, Lord of the Mark!" she cried. "My heart is glad at your returning." "And you, Eowyn," said Theoden, "is all well with you?" "All is well," she answered, yet it seemed to Mary that her voice belied her, and that he would have thought that she had been weeping, if that could be believed of one so stern of face. "All is well. It was a weary road for the people to take, torn suddenly from their homes. There were hard words, for it is long since war has driven us from the green fields. But there have been no evil deeds. All is now ordered, as you see, and your lodging is prepared for you. For I have full tidings of you, and knew the hour of your coming." "So Aragorn has come then," said Eomer. "Is he still here?" "No, he is gone," said Eowyn, turning away and looking at the mountains dark against the east and south. "Whither did he go?" asked Eomer. "I do not know," she answered. "He came at night and rode away yestermorn ere the sun had climbed over the mountain tops. He is gone." "You are grieved, daughter," said Theoden. "What has happened? Tell me, did he speak of that road?" He pointed away towards the darkening lines of stones towards the Dwemerberg. "Of the paths of the dead." "Yes, lord," said Eowyn, "and he has passed into the shadow from which none have returned. I could not dissuade him. He is gone." "Then our paths are sundered," said Eomer. "He is lost. We must ride without him, and our hope dwindles." Slowly they passed through the short heath and upland grass, speaking no more until they came to the king's pavilion. There Merry found that everything was made ready, and that he himself was not forgotten. A little tent had been pitched for him beside the king's lodging, and there he sat alone while men passed to and fro, going in to the king and taking counsel with him. Night came on, and then half-seen heads of the mountains westward were crowned with stars. But the east was dark and blank. The marching stones faded slowly from sight, but still beyond them, blacker than the gloom, brooded the vast crouching shadow of the Dwemerberg. "The paths of the dead," he muttered to himself. "The paths of the dead? What does all this mean? They have all left me now. They have all gone to some doom. Gandalf and Pippin to war in the east, and Sam and Frodo to Mordor, and Strider and Legolas and Gimli to the paths of the dead. But my turn will come soon enough, I suppose. I wonder what they're all talking about, and what the king means to do, for I must go where he goes now. In the midst of these gloomy thoughts, he suddenly remembered that he was very hungry, and he got up to go and see if anyone else in the strange camp felt the same. But at that very moment a trumpet sounded, and a man came summoning him, the king's esquire, to wait at the king's board. All right, let me go ahead and take a bit of a water break here. You're from South Africa? Well, good. I have nothing against anybody from South Africa. It's just that some people... Here's the thing. Tolkien was born in South Africa. So I can understand if you're from South Africa and you are a Tolkien fan, there's a tendency to try to want to claim him, you know what I mean? And to sort of insist that he was inspired by his time in South Africa. And it's easy to find names of places in South Africa that align with things in his work. Now, like I said, we have to remember that the language of South Africa is derived from Dutch. Dutch is derived from Old English. Tolkien is very English. Despite being born in South Africa, he only spent a few years there. He moved back to England when he was 3 years old. So, believe it or not, Afrikaans is one of the few languages out there that he didn't actually speak. And I can tell you, though, most people that I talk to who are from South Africa, not very argumentative, at least in my opinion. But there was this one guy who was just very, very insistent that words like that, like Dwemer Lake, were from Afrikaans. And another one was Adderkop. Adderkop is a word that was used in The Hobbit, and we talked about this a lot when we read The Hobbit. And that Adderkop is sort of pseudo-Latin, actually, but people were insisting that it was similar to an Afrikaans sort of schoolyard taunt that sort of just means puss bag, you know. But the thing is like I said, it's all derived from the same thing. So, you know, there you have it. You know, there's a lot of linguistic similarities, you know. But let's continue onwards here. I did need that water break, though. Russell Crowe. Well, there you have it. I can tell you something, since you're from Australia. I know one thing that aggravates Australians to no end. It's when people from the United States say, "Oh, you're from Australia. You must drink Foster's then, right?" No, no, you don't. I guarantee you that you don't. I've had Foster's. It's so terrible. And I said when I first tried it, I said I think people from Australia know better than to drink this garbage, you know. Let's see. Speaking of names of places found in his books, you have a family book, Recipes and Histories of Lat Me Alice Banks Borlas. The number of towns, rivers, and things listed in her notes and around... Well, I think you cut that off there. See, I knew I was right. No, I knew I was right. Nobody in Australia drinks that stuff, I bet you. I bet you nobody does. I bet you they look at it and they're like, is this what people in other countries think that we like? There's no way. Yeah, he was little when he was a toddler. You wouldn't see it, like I said. It's one of the kind of things that is very American and is marketed as being Australian, but there's no way that it, you know. Well, both times that I had it, because I had it twice, it wasn't a can. It was certainly not an oil can, but it was disgusting. I couldn't drink it. It was so bad. Yep. Indonesian, French, and Dutch. Absolutely. Absolutely. Brandy. Oh, yes. Absolutely. I mean, a lot of those names, I mean, especially stuff to do with the Shire, is all very English countryside stuff. And I mean, like, if you just think about it, the Shire. What does that even mean? In the actual Western language, it was referred to as the Suzat. And in English, it's the Shire. What does that mean? It just means the countryside. And if you look all around England, there's this Shire, that Shire. Shire is just the countryside, you know. Ettercop, yes. Pusset or puss bag, perhaps. But yes, that's it's very similar. It's derived from the same words that Tolkien was using. It's pretty big, I guess. Yeah. Is that big enough for you? Australia. Yeah, there's no way 4X. Oh dear. 4X. I don't know. Dirt water. I don't know about, because that's what I thought Foster's tasted like. I thought this tastes like swamp water to me. I thought it was, yeah. I thought it was pretty nasty. But yeah. I'll stick to, like, you know, Irish beers and such like that, you know. All right, let's continue because we're getting off topic here, and that's partly my fault. Let's see. In the inner part of the pavilion was a small space, curtained off with broidered hangings and strewn with skins, and there at a small table sat Theoden with Eomer and Eowyn and Dunhir, Lord of Harrowdale. Merry stood beside the king's stool and waited on him till presently the old man, coming out of deep thought, turned to him and smiled. "Come, Master Meriadoc," he said. "You shall not stand, you shall sit beside me as long as I remain in my own lands, and lighten my heart with tales." Room was made for the hobbit at the king's left hand, but no one called for any tale. There was indeed little speech, and they ate and drank for the most part in silence, until at last, plucking up courage, Merry asked the question that was tormenting him. "Twice now, Lord, I have heard of the paths of the dead," he said. "What are they? And where has Strider, the Lord Aragorn, where is he gone?" The king sighed, but no one answered, until at last Eomer spoke. "We do not know, and our hearts are heavy," he said. "But as for the paths of the dead, you have yourself walked on their first steps. Nay, I speak no words of ill omen. The road that we have climbed is the approach to the door. Yonder is it in the Dimmelt. But what lies beyond no man knows." "No man knows," said Theoden. "Yet ancient legend, now seldom spoke, has somewhat to report. If these old tales speak true, that have come down from father to son in the house of Eorl, then the door under the Dwimmerberg leads to the secret way that goes beneath the mountain to some forgotten end. But none have ever ventured in to search its secrets since Baldur, son of Brago, passed the door, and was never seen among men again. A rash vow he spoke, as he drained the horn at that feast which Brago made to hallow new-built Meduseld, and he came never to the high seat of which he was the heir." So let's talk about that. He was more goth than thou. By the way, for those of you who see in the Twitch chat, Insane Wayne, that is who I was speaking of earlier. I played a clip of his voice doing the narration. That is Wayne, who did the narrative voice for the play that will be performed live next. You've not seen any kangaroos in Australia? In Austria, rather? I wouldn't think so. Let's talk about this. So this is interesting because sometimes people ask a question about a specific passage, and I can always tell when this sort of interesting you sound hot, this sort of interesting phenomenon happens. I feel like somebody's reading The Lord of the Rings and they get to something that's a mystery and they don't know the answer to it, and then they come running over to Quora and they ask me, what does this mean? Tell me, please. And I always answer, but there is always the temptation to say, well, just keep reading because it's answered on the next page. Or in this case, the next chapter. So in the previous chapter, in the Passing of the Grey Company, as Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas and the sons of Elrond and all of the Dunedain were walking through the paths of the dead, there was one point where they came to a great stone door, and at the base of the stone door was a skeleton of a large man that had died there clawing at the door. They didn't know what the door went to. It wasn't on their path. It wasn't part of their quest. They didn't know who the man was. So a lot of people ask, well, whose skeleton was that? Well, here you go. We just found out. So it was actually just answered right there. And so none has gone there since this guy, Baldur. He was the son of Brago. So he was a prince of Rohan, and he went through the paths of the dead, and Aragorn found a skeleton. So now we actually know what happened to him. He didn't make it all the way through. He was trying to get through this specific door. Oh, that doesn't sound very, Narva, that doesn't sound very compatible, because they're two very different types of lore right there, you know? Very, very different types of lore. They're both lore rich, but very in a different way. So yeah, sometimes the answer is found a little while later. Sometimes it's the next page, sometimes it's the next chapter. So there was a feast, and Brago made a hollow to Newbelt Meduseld, and he made this, and then Baldur made this great boast and this oath, and he went through the paths of the dead to fulfill this oath, never came back. So his skeleton was the one that Aragorn saw in the previous chapter. Now, what's also interesting, they mentioned the house of Eorl. That is, of course, the line of kings in Rohan. Eorl was the first king of Rohan. We're going to learn more about him in Unfinished Tales when we get to that. You know, so yes, and Brago was the name of Aragorn's horse in the film. That is true. Some of the horse names that they used in the film were correct, even if the wrong person was riding them. Brago was obviously just borrowed there. Although I do believe that in a place like Rohan, and that is where that horse came from, he was a horse of Rohan, and of course Rohan means horse country, that they would give their horses the same sort of names that they would give people. So a horse named Brago, not out of the ordinary, really. It's not in the book, but it could very well be. One interesting one is that in the first film, in The Fellowship of the Ring, of course, Arwen played a much bigger role than she had in the book, because she was taking the part of Glorfindel, but she still had the same horse. She referred to her horse as Asfaloth, which is Glorfindel's horse. So there is sort of this joke that goes around that says that Glorfindel is in the movie, you just never see him, and Arwen sort of borrowed his horse for that scene. He stayed home, and Arwen said, "Could I borrow Asfaloth?" All right, let's continue here. Folk say that dead men out of the dark years guard the way, and will suffer no living man to come to their hidden halls, but at whiles they may have themselves be seen passing out of the door like shadows, and down the stony road. Then the people of Harrowdale shut fast their doors, and shroud their windows, and are afraid. But the dead come seldom forth, and only at times of great unquiet and coming death. Yet it is said in Harrowdale, said Eowyn in a low voice, that the moonless nights, but little while ago, a great host in strange array passed by. Whence they came, no one... Let's try that again. Whence they came, none knew. But they went up the stony road and vanished into the hill, as if they went to keep a tryst. Then why has Aragorn gone that way? Asked Merry. Don't you know anything that would explain it? Unless he has spoken words to you as his friend that we have not heard, said Eomer. None now in the land of the living can tell us his purpose. Greatly changed he seemed to me since I saw him first in the king's house, said Eowyn. Grimmer, older, fey I thought him, and like one who the dead call. Maybe he was called, said Theoden, and my heart tells me that I shall not see him again. Yet he is a kingly man of high destiny, and take comfort in this daughter, since comfort you seem to need in your grief for this guest. It is said that when the Eorlingus came out of the north and passed at length up the Snowbourn, seeking strong places of refuge in times of need, Brago and his son Baldur climbed the stair of the hold, and so came before the door. On the threshold sat an old man, aged beyond guess of years, tall and kingly he had been, but now he was withered as an old stone. Indeed, for stone they took him, for he moved not, and he said no word until they sought to pass him by and enter. And then a voice came out of him, as if it were out of the ground, and to their amaze it spoke in the western tongue, The way is shut. Then they halted and looked at him, and saw that he lived still, for he did not look at them. The way is shut, his voice said again. It was made by those who are dead, and the dead keep it until the time comes. The way is shut. And when will that be? Said Baldur. But no answer did he ever get, for the old man died in that hour, and fell upon his face, and no other tidings of the ancient dwellers in the mountains have our folk ever learned. Yet maybe at last the time foretold has come, and Aragorn may pass. So, very interesting. Let's actually, once again, very prophetic words, absolutely true. Like I said earlier, Theoden knows he's at the end of his life, and he's made peace with it. He's seen his own death. He knows. He's a smart guy. He's got foresight. Let's talk about that, the way is shut. That was used in the film in a very different context because the context of Aragorn going through the paths of death was extremely different in the film, even though it came to the same conclusion. It was extremely different. Like, Elrond's sons weren't there. Elrond himself showed up. It was right after he finally got his sword that he should have had since the very beginning of it. But that was what they said to Aragorn in the movie, and here we're seeing that it was said to these men a long time ago. Now, note that when Aragorn came to the door in the book, they didn't say that. And, of course, Peter Jackson wanted to have that dramatic moment, and, yeah, that's very true. I wouldn't say just before. There are a few hours between that, but it does see, it's in the same chapter, so I can understand why you'd say that. He doesn't see Aragorn again. He is correct. But yeah, it's really interesting that he did just basically take this moment out of the past and put it into the film. Not exactly what I would call a bad choice. Let's continue on. But how shall a man discover whether that time be come or no, save by daring the door, said Eomer. And that way I would not go through all the hosts of Mordor stood before me, and I were alone and had no other refuge. Alas, that a fey mood should fall on a man so great-hearted in this hour of need. Are there not evil things enough abroad without seeking them under the earth? War is at hand. He paused, for at that moment there was a noise outside, a man's voice crying the name of Theoden, and the challenge of the guard. Presently the captain of the guard thrust aside the curtain. A man is here, lord, he said, an errand rider of Gondor. He wishes to come before you at once. And now we're actually seeing a throwback to the very first chapter here, the first chapter of The Return of the King, and in fact, even the very first page. In the very first page of The Return of the King in Chapter 1, Minas Tirith, is where Pippin and Gandalf are riding towards the city, and then Shadowfax kind of stops and pauses, for there's horses coming in the other direction. They're coming out of the city. And I mentioned that, 2 months ago when we read that chapter, that we would be coming back to that point, and now here it is. So that was the envoy sent out of Minas Tirith towards Rohan. And this is how Gondor calls for aid. They don't like the beacon. They do like the beacons, but for different reasons. The beacons are to let everybody else in all of Gondor, all the little principalities, know that Gondor is at war and that they should bring their troops to Minas Tirith for a big final stand. But that doesn't actually alert Rohan. Although Rohan's already alerted. Theoden is already raring to go, but this is the official request. So now this rider that passed Gandalf and Pippin in the very first page is arriving in Rohan. Let him come, said Theoden. A tall man entered, and Merry choked back a cry. For a moment it seemed to him that Boromir was alive again and had returned. Then he saw that it was not so. The man was a stranger, though as like to Boromir as if he were one of his kin, tall and grey-eyed and proud. He was clad as a rider with a cloak of dark green over a coat of fine mail. On the front of his helm was wrought a small silver star. In his hand he bore a single arrow, black-feathered and barred with steel, but the point was painted red. He sank on one knee and presented the arrow to Theoden. Hail, Lord of the Rohirrim, friend of Gondor, he said. Here gone I am, errand rider of Denethor, who bring you this token of war. Gondor is in great need. Often the Rohirrim have aided us. But now the Lord Denethor asks for all your strength and all your speed, lest Gondor fall at last. The red arrow, said Theoden, holding it, as one who receives a summons long expected, and yet dreadful when it comes. His hand trembled. The red arrow has not been seen in the mark in all my years. Has it indeed come to that? And what does the Lord Denethor reckon that all my strength and all my speed may be? That is best known to yourself, Lord, said Hirgon. But ere long it may come to pass that Minas Tirith is surrounded, and unless you have the strength to break a siege of many powers, the Lord Denethor bids me say that he judges that the strong arms of the Rohirrim would be better within his walls than without. But he knows that we are a people who fight rather upon horseback and in the open, and that we are also a scattered people, and time is needed for the gathering of our riders. Is it not true, Hirgon, that the Lord of Minas Tirith knows more than he sets in his message? For we are already at war, as you may have seen, and you do not find us all unprepared. Gandalf the Grey has been among us, and even now we are mustering for battle in the east. What the Lord Denethor may know or guess of all these things I cannot say, answered Hirgon. But indeed our case is desperate. My lord does not issue any command to you. He begs you only to remember old friendship and oaths long spoke, and for your own good to do all that you may. It is reported to us that many kings have ridden from the east to the service of Mordor. From the north to the field of Dagorlad there is skirmish and rumour of war. In the south the Haradrim are moving, and fear has fallen on all our coastlands, so that little help will come to us thence. Make haste, for it is before the walls of Minas Tirith that the doom of our time will be decided. And if the tide is not stemmed there, then it will flow all over the fair fields of Rohan, and even in this hold among the hills there shall be no refuge. Dark tidings, said Theoden. Yet not all unguessed. But say to Denethor that even if Rohan itself felt no peril, still we would come to his aid. But we have suffered much loss in our battles with Saruman the traitor, and we must still think of our frontier to the north and east, as his own tidings make clear. So great a power as the Dark Lord seems now to wield might well contain in us battle before the city, and yet strike with great force across the river away beyond the Gate of Kings. But we will speak no longer counsels of prudence. We will come. The weapon take was set for the morrow. When all is ordered, we will set out. 10,000 spears I might have sent riding over the plain to dismay of your foes. It will be less now, I fear, for I will not leave my strongholds all unguarded. Yet 6,000 at the least shall ride behind me. For say to Denethor that in this hour the King of the Mark himself will come down to the land of Gondor. Though maybe he will not ride back. But it is a long road, and man and beast must reach the end with strength to fight. A week it may be from tomorrow's morn ere you hear the cry of the sons of Eorl coming from the north. A week, said Hirgon. If it must be so, it must. But you are like to find only ruined walls in 7 days from now, unless other help unlooked for comes. Still, you may at least disturb the orcs and swarthy men from their feasting in the White Tower. At the least we will do that, said Theoden. But I myself am new come from battle and long journey, and I will go now to rest. Tarry here this night, then you shall look on the muster of Rohan and ride away, the gladder for the sight, and the swifter for the rest. In the morning counsels are best, and night changes many thoughts. All right, let me talk about that, but first back here. A lot of characters seem to feel shame if they don't do something honorable, which I think translates to killing people. I think it translates to defending what is good, the free peoples of Middle-earth, you know? It's sad that it comes to killing. It's sad that there is such a thing as war, but it is a tale of war, and we have to remember that. Now, what's interesting here is Theoden is basically saying to Hirgon here, this is what I want you to tell Denethor. I wish I could come to you as fast as you'd like me to with 10,000 people, but we just had our own little war, and we're going to get there as soon as we can. You know, have faith. We will be there. It's going to be 6,000 people. We will do our best, even if it's just to avenge you. And then later we see Denethor believing that Theoden has completely, ignored his summons and that he's on his own. And why would he believe that? And it's just sad. It's because Hirgon doesn't make it back. Unfortunately, he doesn't make it back to Minas Tirith. And that is sort of the danger of having a single guy be your messenger in a very dangerous land, And we're going to find that out pretty soon, actually, that Hirgon does not make it back to Minas Tirith. And that does a lot to really break Theoden, because Theoden doesn't get that message that Rohan is indeed going to come. And even Theoden here is like, hey, man, we're going to try. We're really going to try. We're going to ride as fast as we can, but keeping in mind that we're going to have to stop and rest every once in a while. Otherwise, we're going to get there all worn out and tired, and we won't be able to fight. But, and then Hirgon says, well, we might be doomed then unless something else helps us, right? And, yep. Gon Burigan is a lot smarter than people give him credit for. He's a perceptive guy, and we're going to get to Gon Burigan pretty soon, actually. But what's really interesting here is there is hope of help unlooked for. Gon Burigan is one of the things, and the other is, of course, Aragorn. They've sort of already written him off. They thought, he went through the paths of the dead. Well, he's done. That sucks, he was a really good guy. He was very strong and powerful. And if you think about it, they think they've lost Aragorn. They think they've lost Elrond's sons and all of the Dunedain. They think they lost Gimli and Legolas. They think they lost a lot of people. As a matter of fact, we're going to learn they didn't lose those. As a matter of fact, though, they gained a bunch of people, because when they overrun the Corsairs of Umbar, those ships were not rowed by the Corsairs. They had slaves there, and a lot of those slaves were men of Gondor, and they wanted to fight too. So Aragorn actually comes back with more people than he left with. But they have no reason to think Aragorn is going to, come out of the paths of the dead. They think he's done at this point. So there is help unlooked for or unexpected. It is Aragorn. And of course, there's also Gon Burigan, as you mentioned, and the Druadan. All right, let's continue here. With that, the king stood up, and they all rose. Go now each to your rest, he said, and sleep well. And you, Master Meriadoc, I need no more tonight, but be ready to my call as soon as the sun has risen. I will be ready, said Merry, even if you bid me ride with you on the paths of the dead. Speak not words of omen, said the king, for there may be more roads than one that could bear that name. But I did not say that I would bid you ride with me on any road. Good night. I won't be left behind or be called for on return, said Merry. I won't be left, I won't. And repeating this over and over again to himself, he fell asleep at last in his tent. He was wakened by a man shaking him. Wake up, Master Holbitla, he cried. There it is. There's that word, Holbitla, constructed Old English for someone who lives in a burrow, a dweller of a burrow, which is what hobbit means. And at length Merry came out of the deep dreams and sat up with a start. It all seemed very dark, he thought. What is the matter, he asked. The king calls for you. But the sun has not risen yet, said Merry. No, and will not rise today, Master Holbitla, nor ever again, one would think, under this cloud. But time does not stand still, though the sun was lost. Make haste. So now we are at this point, come to the point where we understand where everything's happened. Frodo's walking up the stairs of Cirith Ungol, or he has a little while ago, because it takes some time for the cloud of darkness to come to this part, right? And you can kind of see where everything is happening sequentially in terms of this darkness, this endless night that Sauron casts over the Southlands. And what's really interesting is that it actually was already happening, because when Merry arrived here at Dunharrow, he gave a very vivid description of all the lands, but he said in the east was darkness. There were stars above the mountains in the north. There were stars above the mountains in the west. To the south, there aren't any mountains. There are. There are mountains there too. But in the east is darkness, because that was coming already. And then we think, the sun, it actually has risen. It's just hidden away. So what we have here is this almost sort of like nuclear winter scenario where Sauron has blanketed the whole region with volcanic smoke. Flinging on some clothes, Merry looked outside. The world was darkling, the very air seemed brown, and all things about were black and grey and shadowless. There was a great stillness. No shape or cloud could be seen unless it were far away westward, where the further groping fingers of the great gloom still crawled onwards, and a little light leaked through them. Overhead there hung a heavy roof, somber and featureless, and light seemed rather to be failing than growing. All right. I also want to mention that this also reminds me of a few years ago, there was this situation here in the United States, and it was also happening in Canada, where there was a really, really bad series of wildfires in the West, in California. And due to the winds and how long it all burned, all of the smoke and the ash and everything went across the entire continent, really, because it was all across the United States and all across Canada. And we here, I'm on the East Coast, very far away from California. We didn't have sunlight for like about a week. It was really, really wild. And what Mary here is describing is what it was like. You would look outside and you would just see brown and umber, and it was just very thick. And we were told to stay inside because the air quality was so poor. You would go outside for just a brief moment and your eyes would burn and you would get a nasty cough. It was very perilous for your health, and it went on for quite a while before it all cleared up. And I happened to be in this little pocket where it was, much worse than the surrounding area, which was not great. Because even in the house, it was just terrible. And then you have to open the door for just the briefest moment. And, and some of the bad air would get in. So I kind of like, now that I've experienced something like that, that paragraph right there, feels much more real. Now, Joe already pointed out groping great gloom, and I was going to say that paragraph there, extremely prose poetic. Extremely so, because that was not the only instance of alliteration there. We had the furthest groping figures of the great gloom, and then right after that, a little light leaked, and then hung a heavy roof. So there's triple alliteration, and then double alliteration right there. The fires were really bad. And unfortunately, I have friends on the West Coast, and they were going through it so much worse. And I was thinking, oh my God, it must be like Mordor over there, because it's really bad here, thousands of miles away. So I could only imagine how bad it was on the West Coast, just a terrible situation, and I felt like I was getting sick from it. And, so, I kind of felt like Mary, where, hey, wait a minute, I'm not in Mordor, I'm in Rohan, and we're getting this, So that's kind of what it's like. Now, thankfully, this isn't like a choking sort of smoke, although I think, Sauron would probably enjoy that. His orcs probably wouldn't enjoy that. But it is the same sort of description of like looking outside, it's daytime, but you don't see the sun. And it goes on for several days. All right, let's continue here. Mary saw many folks standing, looking up and muttering. All their faces were grey and sad, and some were afraid. With a sinking heart he made his way to the king. Hirgon, the rider of Gondor, was before them. And beside him stood now another man, like him and dressed alike, but shorter and broader. As Mary entered, he was speaking to the king. "It comes from Mordor, lord," he said. "It began last night at sunset. From the hills in the east folds in your realm I saw it rise and creep across the sky, and all night as I rode it came behind, eating up the stars. Now the great cloud hangs over the land between here and the mountains of shadow, and it is deepening. War has already begun." For a while the king sat silent. At last he spoke. "So we come to it in the end," he said. "The great battle of our time, in which many things shall pass away. But at least there is no longer need for hiding. We will ride the straight way in the open road, and with all our speed. The muster shall begin at once, and wait for none that tarry. Have you good store in Minas Tirith? For if we must ride now in all haste, then we must ride light, with but meal and water enough to last us into battle. "We have very great store long prepared," answered Hirgon. "Ride now as light and swift as you may." "Then call the heralds, Eomer," said Theoden. "Let the riders be marshalled." Eomer went out, and presently the trumpets rang in the hold, and were answered by many others from now, but their voices no longer sounded clear and brave as they had seemed to Merry the night before. Dull they seemed and harsh in the heavy air, braying ominously. For you to be sick thousands of miles away is just I mean, yeah. I mean, part of it is I live in a place that's not that different from Rohan in the way that it's mountainous. I'm on a mountain right now. It's clear air. I'm not near... I'm near a few major cities, but they're like an hour away. I'm about an hour and a half away from New York City, But I'm in the country. I'm in my own little shire here. So I'm used to very clean air. And then for that to happen, I was feeling pretty sick, especially since the fact that I have some digestive issues that cause me to, and allergies that were just compounded by it, right? Yeah, movie Gandalf did steal that line. A lot of the lines in the film were from the book. They were just moved around a little bit. Of course, there was a lot that were created for the film, but there was a lot of dialogue that was moved around and changed from character to character. Like I said, Arwen borrowed Glorfindel's horse. The king turned to Merry. "I am going to war, Master Meriadoc," he said. In a little while I shall take up the road. I release you from my service, but not from my friendship. You shall abide here, and if you will, you shall serve the Lady Eowyn, who will govern the folk in my stead." But Lord," Merry stammered, "I offered you my sword. I do not want to be parted from you like this Theoden king. And as all my friends have gone to the battle, I should be ashamed to stay behind." "But we ride on horses tall and swift," said Theoden, "and great though your heart be, you cannot ride on such beasts." "Then tie me on to the back of one, or let me hang on a stirrup or something," said Merry. "It is a long way to run, but run I shall if I cannot ride, even if I wear my feet off and arrive weeks too late." Theoden smiled. "Rather than that, I would bear you with me on Snowmane," he said. "But at the least you shall ride with me to Edoras and look on Meduseld, for that way I shall go. As far Stibba can bear you, the great race will not begin until we reach the plains." Then Eowyn rose up. "Come now, Meriadoc," she said. "I will show you the gear that I have prepared for you." They went out together. "This request only did Aragorn make to me," said Eowyn, as they passed among the tents, "that you should be armed for battle. I have granted it as I could, for my heart tells me that you will need such gear ere the end." Now she led Merry to a booth among the lodges of the king's guard, and there an armourer brought out to her a small helm and a round shield and other gear. "No mail we have to fit you," said Eowyn, "nor any time for the forging of such a hauberk. But here is also a stout jerkin of leather, a belt, and a knife. A sword you have." Merry bowed, and the lady showed him the shield, which was like the shield that had been given to Gimli, and it bore on it the device of the white horse. "Take all these things," she said, "and bear them to good fortune. Farewell now, Master Meriadoc. Yet maybe we shall meet again, you and I." She's already planning to do what she's going to do here, we see. She knows what's up. So it was that amid a gathering gloom, the king of the Mark made ready to lead all his riders on the eastern road. Hearts were heavy, and many quailed in the shadow, but they were a stern people, loyal to their lord, and little weeping or murmuring was heard, even in the camp in the hold where the exiles from Edoras were housed, women and children and old men. Doom hung over them, but they faced it silently. 2 swift hours passed, and now the king sat upon his white horse, glimmering in the half-light. Proud and tall he seemed, though the hair that flowed beneath his high helm was like snow, and many marvelled at him and took heart to see him unbent and unafraid. There on the wide flats beside the noisy river were marshalled in many companies well nigh 55 hundreds of riders fully armed, and many hundreds of other men with spare horses lightly burdened. A single trumpet sounded, the king raised his hand, and silently the host of the Mark began to move. Foremost went 12 of the king's household men, riders of renown. Then the king followed with Eomer on his right. He had said farewell to Eowyn above in the hold, and the memory was grievous. But now he turned his mind to the road that lay ahead. Behind him Merry rode on Stibba with the errand riders of Gondor. and behind them again 12 more of the king's household. They passed down the long ranks of waiting men with stern and unmoved faces. But when they had come almost to the end of the line, one looked up, glancing keenly at the hobbit. A young man, Merry thought as he returned the glance, less in height and girth than most. He caught the glint of clear grey eyes, and then he shivered, for it came suddenly to him that it was the face of one without hope, who goes in search of death. That was Éowyn. On down the grey road they went beside the Snowbourn, rushing in its stones, though the hamlets of Underharrow and Upbourne, where many sad faces of women looked out from dark doors, and so without horn or harp of music or men's voices, the great ride into the east began, which the songs of Rohan were busy for many long lives of men thereafter. Tolkien giving away too much right there, right? He tells you, we're going to get to the song here, but he says, the songs of Rohan were busy for many long lives of men thereafter, which tells you that the culture of Rohan does sort of survive, right? But of course, the very fact that we're reading a book that, that Frodo essentially wrote, right? In universe, it was Frodo, that, hey, look, it does turn out okay. Gathering gloom, the Moody Blues use that phrase in Nights in White Satin. Beneath the gathering gloom. I believe Nights in White Satin is referring to nighttime and not nights spelled with a K like that. I do have the album. Let me bring it up here. Moody Blues. Here it is. The Days of Future Past. Yeah, it's nights as in nighttime. Excellent album. You have good taste in music if you know the Moody Blues. But Gathering Gloom is actually pretty common thing. I don't know that I would say that they took it from Tolkien. Perhaps they did. I mean, they're an English band, and they did speak on some topics that were sort of almost a little bit fantastical, like that album, The Days of Future Past. But it's something you see in a lot of literature, is what I'm getting at there. How did Rohan get enough food to travel to Gondor? Well, we actually just covered that because he said to Hirgon, hey, do you have like a lot of food stored in Minas Tirith? Because if we're going to get there quickly, we're going to have to ride pretty light with only just enough food and just enough water to get there. And then after that, we're going to have to make use of your hospitality. And Hirgon said to him, we got plenty. We got all you could need. Ride as fast and light as you want. So, and you also have to remember that this is something that even though Hirgon just got there with the Red Arrow the night before, Theoden had been planning to do this. Like, even before Helm's Deep, he was planning to do this. So, it's sort of like, in Helm's Deep, there were lots of provisions, and at Edoras, there are lots of provisions, and then they have this makeshift camp. So, and that's a lot of what Éowyn was in charge of, actually, because she was doing the moving and the governing and everything, the mustard of Rohan. Now, okay, wait, what sort of mustard do you think Rohan would have? I feel like it would be is something like a gray stone ground sort of mustard, right? I feel like that's the sort of mustard that they would have. Here's the song. From dark Dunharrow in the dim morning, with Thane and Captain rode Thengel's son. To Edoras he came, the ancient halls of the Mark Warden's mist enshrouded. Golden timbers were in gloom mantled. Farewell he bade to his free people, hearth and high seat, and the hallowed places where long he had feasted ere the light faded. Forth rode the king, fear behind him, fate before him, fealty kept he, oaths he had taken, all fulfilled them. Forth rode Theoden 5 nights and days, east and onward rode the Eorlingus, through fold and fen march and the Firian wood. 6,000 spears to Sunlanding, Mundburg, and the mighty over Mindolluin, Sea King's city in the South Kingdom. Foe beleaguered, fire encircled, doom drove them on, darkness took them, horse and horseman, hoofbeats afar, sank into silence, so the song tell us. Don't be sorry, that was funny. Don't be sorry. The mustard thing was hilarious. So yeah, excellent little poem there. Tolkien, I felt like during his time, he didn't really get enough attention for his poetry. As a matter of fact, there were a lot of critics at the time when The Lord of the Rings was released in the 50s. They said his poetry was pretty bad, actually. That's what critics were saying. Poets were saying it was excellent, but critics were saying it was bad, which really shows you what the critics at the time knew. It wasn't until, like 10 years later in the 60s when it started to pick up and people started really actually appreciating The Lord of the Rings. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. That's actually one of the most detailed ASCII swords I've seen. That's pretty good there. I mean, it even looks like it could be, like a sword from The Legend of Zelda. If there was a version of it that was like with ASCII graphics instead of drawn. It was indeed in deepening gloom the king came to Edoras, although it was then but noon by the hour. There he halted only a short while, and strengthened his host by some 60 of riders that came late to the weapons take. Now, having eaten, he made ready to set out again, and he wished his esquire a kindly farewell, but Mary begged for the last time not to be parted from him. "This is no journey for such steeds as Stibba, as I have told you," said Theoden. "And in such a battle as we think to make on the fields of Gondor, what would you do, Master Meriadoc, sword thane though you be, and greater of heart than of stature?" "As for that, who can tell?" answered Merry. "But why, Lord, did you receive me as sword thane, if not to stay by your side? And I would not have it said of me in song, only that I was left behind." "I received you for your safe keeping," answered Theoden, "and also to do as I might bid. None of my riders can bear you as burden. If the battle were before my gates, maybe your deeds would have been remembered by the minstrels. But it is 100 leagues and 2 to Munburg, where Denethor is lord. I will say no more." Merry bowed and went away unhappily, and stared at the lines of horsemen. Already the companies were preparing to start. Men were tightening girths, looking to saddles, caressing their horses. Some gazed uneasily at the lowering sky. Unnoticed, a rider came up and spoke softly in the hobbit's ear. "Where will wants not, a way opens, so we say," he whispered, "and so I have found myself." Merry looked up and saw that it was the young rider whom he had noticed in the morning. "You wish to go whither the Lord of the Mark goes. I see it in your face." "I do," said Merry. "Then you shall go with me," said the rider. "I will bear you before me under my cloak until we are far afield, and this darkness is yet darker. Such good will should not be denied. Say no more to any man, but come." "Thank you indeed," said Merry. "Thank you, sir, though I do not know your name." "Do you not?" said the rider softly. "Then call me Durnhelm." Thus it came to pass that when the king set out before Durnhelm, set Meriadoc the hobbit, and the great grey steed Windfaller made little of the burden, for Durnhelm was less in weight than many men, though lithe and well knit in frame. On into the shadow they rode, in the willow thickets where Snowbourn flowed into Entwash. 12 leagues east of Edoras they camped that night. And then on again through the fold, and through the fen march, where to their right great oak woods climbed on the skirts of the hills, under the shades of the dark I'm sorry. The digestive issues that I alluded to, I do have a acid reflux problem. Where to their right great oak woods climbed on the skirts of the hills under the shades of dark Helifirion by the borders of Gondor. But away to their left the mists lay on the marshes fed by the mouths of Entwash. And as they rode, rumour came of war on the north. Lone men, riding wild, brought word of foes assailing their east borders, of orc hosts marching into the wold of Rohan. Ride on, cried Eomer. "Too late now to turn aside. The fens of Entwash must guard our flank. Haste, now we need, ride on." And so King Theoden departed from his own realm, and mile by mile the long road wound away, and the beacon hills marched past, Calenhad, Min Rimmon, Erlis, Nardol. But their fires were quenched, all the lands were grey and still, and ever the shadow deepened before them, and hope waned in every heart. And that's the end of that chapter. Now, we're not going to have enough time to continue. We're going to have to let this be a one chapter, slightly shorter stream. Because the next chapter is chapter 4, The Siege of Gondor, and that's another big one with a lot of things. That's where we'll be switching over to Pippin. Now, let's see. We have a question here. Did Rohan warriors ever eat horse? No. I would think that if somebody from Rohan ate a horse, it would sort of... I think it would be sort of like it would have to be a starvation sort of situation. I think they would almost culturally consider that cannibalism. Yes, and that's important. And we just had a quiz about this a few days ago, where when exactly does Mary find out that Durnhelm is Eowyn? And she never takes off the helmet, and it's when she says her name, when she says it to the Witch King. In the film, they did something I think that was actually pretty smart, because you wouldn't expect Mary, who knows Eowyn pretty well at this point, to not recognize her. So as soon as she scoops him up, he's like, "My lady," he's very excited, right? Would it be akin to a Hindu eating a cow? It's a little bit different, because in the Hindu culture, the cows are considered sacred simply due to the fact that they produce milk, and milk is considered sacred in their religion. Whereas in Rohan, horses are just an important part of their culture. It's almost like they're citizens of Rohan themselves. Like, Rohan means horse country. In their own language, they called it Riddermark, which is mark of the riders. Their horses get their own graves with their names and everything, and little poems about them. So it's like, I think that they would consider their horses are the people of Rohan just as much as they are. So actually, it would be more like a person in most of the Western civilizations, such as the United States and many parts of Europe and Canada, to eat a dog. And there are places in the world where people eat dog because it's usually a poverty thing. It's almost never a cultural thing. It's almost always a poverty thing. But it's just because we consider them to be companions. And yeah, there are places in the real world where people eat horse. It's very popular, for example, in Belgium. Horse meat is very popular. But Rohan, not so much. Rohan is, interestingly, because geographically, it would really kind of be Austria geographically. It would be Austria or perhaps Switzerland. But culturally, it's more like Denmark. It's like Denmark culturally, this pseudo-Scandinavian sort of culture, these Northmen, that they just happen to abide in the south, So, yeah. What's interesting is if you overlay a map of Europe onto a map of Middle Earth, and you line it up where Hobbiton is Oxford, and you scale it correctly where Mount Doom is in Sarajevo, then you'll see that the things that Tolkien says are very true. Rivendell is somewhere in Germany. Not Rivendell. Well, yeah, not Rivendell. Mirkwood is in Germany. Well, Rivendell is sort of like the West Germany, But anyway, what I'm getting at is, when he, in his letters, he took a lot of trips to Italy, and he referred to it as Gondor. Gondor was very, very based on Italy, and if we think of ancient Rome as being Numenor, of course, Numenor is also Atlantis, But when we see popular depictions of Atlantis, it does have this sort of like usually depicted as a Romanesque architecture and culture. But anyway, it's interesting. Like I said, there's no France. France is in the ocean. France is like Beleriand, or something like that. There's no, not even, because it would be to the south. There's no France. And I think Tolkien was sort of like having a little laugh there, very English of him to not acknowledge the existence of France. Even though you think it would be, a hop, skip, and a jump away from the Shire, it would, there's just ocean there in his map. Of course, like I said, there's not a 1-to-1 sort of ratio here. But if you think about a lot of like Bree land as sort of like Doggerland, But anyway, yeah, culturally, Rohan is sort of like Denmark in a way. So, and I'm talking about, not Denmark now, but the ancient Danes, Mirkwood is probably, yes, absolutely, the Black Forest. It's absolutely 100%. What about Mongolia? People keep saying Mongolia. What about Mongolia? I'm not sure what the correlation there is with Mongolia. I do want to find out. You're in Rohan, exactly. You're in Rohan. What's interesting is that I don't know. Laurel said she was going to be listening. I don't know if she's in the chat right now, but all of us that are in the 9, the writing group on Quora that Matt put together, we have our own little wax seal kits, and I have one here from Laurel. It's kind of hard to make out. We all have a coin to make a wax seal with, and we all have a different part of Middle Earth that we represent. And if I go to here, let's meet here in the old forest. And if I hold up, see, it's a green sticky note, so you can't see it at all. But here at the top this is our copy of Beowulf. I don't know if the camera's really going to pick that up, the pink wax seal, but there's a horse on there. It's the mark of a horse, because Laurel's realm in Middle Earth is Rohan. Reminds you of the Crash Course history of Mongolian. I see. You're going to Gondor. You're going to Gondor. Where in Italy, if you don't mind me asking? I'm curious about that. The stream has been taken over by the Mongolian lobby. Have they brought Mongolian barbecue? Because that's delicious. That's delicious. But yeah, anyway, so I think I have something here from Matt with his seal on it. Let's see if I do. I'll show you his. So I was going through some of this old mail the other day, and I think I saw something from Matt there. Oh, here it is. I found it. All right, let's show this one. So this is the one that Matt sends. It's black, unfortunately. But if I tilt it just right, you could see the Eye of Sauron on there. Because Matt's realm wound up being Mordor, not because he chose Mordor, but because when Matt had the 9 of us, and having us all choose a different realm so that he can get these coins and send them to us with the seal making kits and everything, he resolved that whatever the last one left would be, he would take. And nobody wanted Mordor, so Matt got stuck with Mordor. But he has fun with it, He has fun with it. Now, if you're wondering, I actually chose Lindon, but unfortunately the company did not have a coin to represent Lindon. So Matt's like, I'm so sorry, they don't have a Lindon coin. And I'm like, oh, it would have been cool. It would have had a ship or something on it, I would imagine. So I said, well, I guess I'll take the Shire then. So mine is the Shire. It's the willow tree, the party tree from Bilbo's Bilbo's birthday party. Well, not that it wasn't created for his birthday party, but it was called the party tree after the party. And yes, on the pinned message is a link to a GoFundMe. It's to help support my moderator, Alice, who lost a lot in the past 2 years. Their apartment burned down about year before last, and they lost pretty much everything. Very few things were saved, and then they had their PlayStation stolen, which it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's kind of a big deal when you consider everything else they lost. And then this was also their way of watching television, and it's just they've had such a rough go of it, So I know a lot of you guys helped me out when I had the GoFundMe with my PC and everything. This is not as big of a goal, and they're already partly there. But even if you just take the link and share it around, it would really mean a lot. So that being said, oh, that's where they eat horses. That's where you're saying Mongolia. Well, Mongolia is not the only place where they eat horses. I mean, horse meat is eaten in a lot of places in the world. I mean, I use Belgium as an example just because it's sort of unusual. Most of Europe sort of turns their nose up at eating horses, but in Belgium, it's actually really, really popular. It's actually really, really popular. And parts of France will eat horse meat. Personally, I mean, I'm sort of an adventurous eater, so I'll kind of like almost try anything. There are a few lines I won't cross. I won't eat, like dogs or cats, for example. Horse is, oh God, that's like so on the borderline. I don't know. So you're going to Lombardia for 3 weeks? Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. Take lots of pictures. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see Italy. There is some Italian in my own ancestry. Now, interestingly enough, when I get my DNA done, or I didn't get my DNA done, but my sister did, and since it's my sister, it's like the same DNA essentially, right? You're a naysayer, Joe, with the puns tonight. First the mustard of Rohan, and now a naysayer. By the way, Joe, do you know what the name of the first horse in Middle-earth was? Nayar. Orma's steed was Nayar. And when asked what it meant, he said, it's the sound he makes when he wants to ride. He named his horse Nay. Right? So, there you have it. But anyway, when we had the DNA thing done, it turned out that the majority, or at least the plurality of my DNA, turned out to be from Portugal, which was interesting. It was the highest thing on the list. Was Portugal, which means that it probably is on both sides, because I have like like my father was of Hispanic descent, and there was a little bit indigenous, there was a little bit of Spain in there, and there had to be some Portugal as well. And then on the other side is mostly English and Italian, but there has to be some. Yeah, it was definitely a dad joke. Absolutely. I love dad jokes. There has to be some on both sides for Portugal to come up as the first thing, So it was sort of like, wow, I didn't know that I was Portuguese until I saw that result. But anyway, I do have ancestry in Italy, specifically Sicily. So there you have it. For example, my great grandmother, that is my mother's father's mother, who we called Grandma Annie. I was Grandma Annie growing up. She was from Sicily. And let me tell you, she could cook. She was the old Italian nonna that you knew, that everybody knew somebody like that if you have any Italian in your family, where you pop on by and they'll like, I'll put out a few light snacks, and before you know it, the table is filled with food. She starts with, oh, here's some salami, here's some cheese, and then before you know it, a whole chicken is coming out, and there's cannoli, and you know what I mean? It just gets out of hand, and then all of a sudden she's in there making spaghetti, and you're like, whoa, what happened to a light snack? And this is a light snack, Oh. You heard a man gave lizard DNA and it came back with normal. Well, those tests are not made to detect anything but human DNA. So if you were to give any sort of animal DNA, it's going to be all garbled. You know what I mean? It's not going to make a lot of sense. I don't remember exactly which company it was, but I could text my sister and ask her. I don't think I'll get an answer very quickly. Because they're going to end stream fairly soon. But if she happens to answer quickly, I'll let you know. Let's see. Where's my... There she is. I'm gonna text my sister and ask her if she remembers. She might not even remember. Do you remember what company it was when when you did that DNA test? Yeah, if she happens to answer very quickly, I'll let you know. But but then again, you gotta take those sort of stories with a sort of a grain of salt, because it's like the guy says he put lizard DNA in there, but did he really? Well, it was one of the big companies. Like, I don't know if it was 23andMe or it was one of like the really, really big ones. Like I said, I didn't do it. My sister did it. I personally wouldn't want to do it, but since she did it, I was like, okay, I'll take a glance at the results, because we are, siblings. We're going to have the same results, really. There might be a small variance, very, very small variance in the results, but it would be extremely negligible. It might be like a tiny percentage. So I personally never had the, I wouldn't want to send my genetic profile to any corporation. Especially since, and we talked about this in recent episodes, with these companies out here that all seem to have very ominous names like Palantir and Sauron and Mithril and all this stuff. Well, so yeah, we're probably related. We're all related, man. I mean, it's possible, certainly. What's your surname? It's possible, but I mean, we're all related, right? You go far back enough. Nazgul. Is there corporation Nazgul? I could call her, but there is also the possibility that she's like sort of, getting to go to bed or something at this point, so I won't call her. Nona's cooking is... She was the best cook that I've ever met. And it was really a privilege to have known my great grandmother for as long as I did, because she lived until I was in my late 20s when she passed away, and she was in her 90s, so it was pretty amazing. There's an old skeleton found in Europe that is linked to 100,000 people. Yeah, I said we're all related. I mean, something like 5% of the world is descended from Genghis Khan. I mean, you start to hear those sort of things, right? But anyway, folks, let's head over to, if I could find it here, because we're going to be ending. I don't think my sister saw the text right away, so I'll let you guys know. She didn't answer me yet. She's not even online right now, so she's probably in bed at this point. But we're going to go over the schedule now. If you're watching me over on Lombard, the Italian side of my family were the Raciopis. Here in America we say Racciopi, but I believe the Italian pronunciation is Raciopi. Like I said, it's Sicilian. But anyway, let's go over the schedule. If you're watching me on Twitch, you guys know I stream every day, and I will be live tomorrow afternoon playing Dragon Quest II. Saturday night, Xenoblade 3. Sunday night, Mega Man 04. Monday afternoon, Street Fighter 6. A lot of games with numbers in the titles, huh? Tuesday night, Hollow Knight, Silk Song. Wednesday afternoon, Sea of Stars. And then Thursday night, and this is relevant if you're watching on YouTube, we'll be live here on YouTube and also on Twitch, where I will be playing the Two Towers Game Boy game some more. Time to ride off on Huan and give him giant treats. I think a milk bone for Huan would be like this, The Faithful Stone. That's it. Oh, see, when I found Tel Elmar, I was like, I'm not sure if this is it. I knew there was a story that took place in the same region in the peoples of Middle-earth. But I sometimes confuse the two. So you're actually right. It was Unfinished Tales. The Faithful Stone, that's the one. So we'll get to that. Anyway, the Two Towers game, the Game Boy game, which is really good, really fun, and a lot of cool things to talk about. We went over some runes and stuff, and there's all sorts of like interesting gear to find. Really fun game. That's the next Tolkien stream next Thursday. And then on the 4th, 3 weeks from today, we will be back here, and we are going to be performing the play. Beren and Luthien. We have the narration from Wayne. You know what? I'm going to give you guys a treat before we go. I'm going to play another one of Wayne's. Wayne there is in the chat on the Twitch side. I'm going to play another one of his narrations. Here's the intro for Act 3, Scene 4. I'm going to play that one.
In the dungeon pits of Tol Sirion, Luthien and Huan pass by thralls stumbling, rubbing eyes, limping and walking wearily past them to escape. They find the bodies of Finrod and his companions, and finally Beren, slumped in the corner near death.
There you go. So then of course, Matt and Laurel would be talking there, where, because Matt is playing Beren and Laurel is playing Luthien. And if you guys are wondering when I'm like, hey, Mel reads it, you're kind of coming in at the end, but hi, if you're wondering what parts I'm going to play in the play, I'll tell you. So I play Thingol, I play Celegorm, I play Sauron, which is fun. I play Huan. He only has one line, but I play Huan. I play Kacharoth, who doesn't have any lines, but I get to make some growling noises and such there. So those are the ones that I play. And of course, Matt, he plays Beren. He plays Daeron. Oh, actually, I play Finrod. I didn't underline it here, but we changed that. He was originally going to play Finrod. I play Finrod. He plays Mandos. He plays Morgoth. And then, of course, Laurel is playing Luthien, and she is also playing Melian, and she's a few other of the minor characters. What accents do I use? Well, and this is interesting, because I actually decided that Thingol should have a bit of a Welsh accent. So I turned very Welsh when I started talking as Ilu Thingol, you see. And it was interesting because Matt in the table read said to me, well, maybe you should do more English. And I said, well, I think that would be more of the Noldor speech would be English, because they're sort of the snooty high elves, right? Thingol's this rustic king of the woodland realm, and Sindarin sounds Welsh, So I become very Welsh when I speak of Thingol. And then Celegorm and Finrod have this sort of posh accent like this, And then Sauron speaks like this. Here, I'll give you a little Sauron. Let's see. Sauron is the dark green. I'll give you one of Sauron's lines. Sauron's the dark green. I gotta find one of his lines. There's a lot of songs and poems in this, too. That's Thingol. Where are you, Sauron? I mean, he doesn't have a lot of lines, but he's in there. That's Finrod. Celegorm. Here we are. I'll give you one of the Sauron lines. What a sordid company this is. 11 elves and a man this far north are never innocent of anything. Who are you and what is your mission? That's my Sauron voice. So, there we go. Let's put that all back together, and we're going to end stream. If you're watching on YouTube, the live is going to end. If you're watching on Twitch, we're going to raid somebody. Luthien. Ah, yes, man. All right. Let's see who we're going to raid today for the Twitch side of things. I see Tacos live. I see Dre. I see Zophar. I see Aquilum. Alizon. Liaison. I think we are going to raid. Shiny Mary's on. I'm actually going to go ahead and raid Taco. She's playing, what, Skyrim? She's playing Skyrim. She's not playing Skyrim right this very moment, but she's been live for 8 hours, so I'm assuming Skyrim is going to happen at some point. Let's raid her. Okay. We'll do a very Rohan sort of raid call here, I think. Okay. Mixing a little bit of Theoden here with a little bit of Eomer. And for those of you, like I said, that are on YouTube, thank you for coming by. The live is about to end. I will see you guys next week. For those of you on Twitch, I will see you tomorrow. I'm stalling, so the ad that's playing will end. There's a small Project Hail Mary. I gotta see that movie. All right, here we go. Oh, it's on Amazon Prime. I'll have to watch that.